So just a brief, just an introduction to, so Professor Zhiguo Yuan, he is currently the director at the AWMC, the Advanced Water Management Center. So he has won over 30 million competitive funding since 2001, including 28 RC, Discovery, and Linkage grant as a chief investigator. So up to date, he has published over 280 journal papers, including one in Nature in 2013 and one Science in 2014. His H index is 51 since February 2016, with over 8,200 citations. So without further delay, let's welcome Professor Yuan.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. And I think this is a nice seminar room, and this is my second time to be here. I think both times we run out of chairs, so I suggest we organize all future seminars in this room. But more seriously, I'd like to thank the postgraduate committee to making such an opportunity for me to communicate with our students. Please come in. We just started. So probably no chairs, and just stand somewhere. I actually find it quite fascinating. Can everybody hear me? I'm not using the microphone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, very good. So I actually find it fascinating that I'm standing here to talk about scientific writing. I'm saying this because I never liked scientific writing or any writing, and I still don't. So that's the reason 35 years ago, I think 35 years ago when I finished my school and I've chosen engineering, and with the belief or assumption that I would never need to write again. And 35 years later, and writing is actually my #1 job. So I have to write a lot of proposals, as Shaw said, and many ARC grant applications and other grant applications. I have to write, I don't write too many papers by myself, but I do have to review and revise many papers written by students. So I have learned in a hard way how to write. So I guess for those who enjoy writing, like Camilla, and yeah, so that's very good. If you don't, you have my companion. So I was not a good writer. Now, let me start by asking you one question. Why do you write a paper? Can someone answer that question? Why do you write a paper?
So we pass our PhD.
Oh yeah, that's actually a standard answer. And people say, okay, I need to write a paper in order to finish my PhD, or my supervisor has told me I should write a paper, I got enough materials. The question there is, why do you think people would accept your paper? Because you can write, you can submit, but then your paper will be sent to reviewers, and there will be editor will look after the reviewing process. Why do you think an editor or a reviewer would like to accept your paper for a journal or a conference or Science Nature, this very prestigious journals? Why do you think they will accept your paper for publication?
Add knowledge to the literature.
Yeah, very good. So you add knowledge to literature, and that means you have something that is valuable to share with your peers. Is that right? You have something that you can share, and it's not you can share. It's actually you need to convince your reviewer or the editor that you have something that others would be interested in, right? So really we are saying you have got messages you want to communicate with the readers, and your readers will benefit from reading your paper, right? So that's the key thing. You're not really writing a paper as your own hobby, or you want to have your work documented. You can do that for yourself, but your documented work, if not of interest to the general readers, it won't be accepted. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is, #1, I'd like to talk about how to identify messages based on your experimental findings, or whatever types of findings you have got, how to identify messages. And number two, the second aspect is how you deliver the messages in a clear way. Right? So these are two topics I'm going to talk about today. Now, I'm going to share with you, this is the experience I have accumulated over many years. I call this a three-circle approach for identifying messages. I did not patent this, so everybody can use, without paying any license fee. So my approach is you draw three circles. The first one is about what does your data tell. So if you have done the experiment and you have got a lot of data, after analyzing the data, you see my paper or my work tells 5 things, noted as A, B, C, D, E. Those 5 things that you can conclude from your data. That's the first circle. The second one is you need to know, I'm sure you know, before you did the experiment, you already did literature review. I'm sure while you're doing experiments, you also did literature review. And there's a blue circle there. And you actually need to know what are known in the literature already, in the public literature already. So here, for example, in the A, B, C, D, E, B and the D, these are 2 messages that have been delivered by others already. They are not new messages anymore, right? This is very important. So now you know you can't really focus on B and the D because they are known. And now you have A, C, E as options. The third circle is about what are important. So you have been doing research in that field, you know what readers want to know, and this is your circle. If your circle, this pink one is here, now the question is, among A, B, C, D, E, which one do you write your paper for? Is that E, right? The winner is E. This is because E is novel, is important, and it's one of your findings. So the winner here clearly is E, and then you write a paper around E to deliver this key message E. But then other findings, we're not saying they're useless, they are secondary. Then you see, okay, by the way, my data also reveals A and C. They're novel. People don't know, although they're probably not that important. And then also confirms D and B. So others have reported, and I have provided new evidence to support D and B. So this is how you sort of identify the key messages you want to deliver in your paper. And I'd like to highlight that you have the importance of identifying E, rather than you sell A, B, C, D, E simultaneously. So that's one good or bad example. Some years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I had a PhD student who did a very good work, and this was one of the papers she wrote. And against my advice, and the student chose to show all the findings she found. So basically, did not distinguish between A, B, C, D, E. So look, I've done 100 experiments, and by looking at our data tells we have A, B, C, D, E, and they wrote the 5 messages all together. And then we submitted the paper to a journal. We got it reviewed by 3 reviewers. You can read the comments there. The first one said, as it is, the manuscript only presents conclusions already reported in previous studies. The thing is, this student did find something new. There was novel finding there. But when you present everything together, and the reviewer could not identify that anymore. This is the second one. Basically says the same thing. This research include a number of the results that are not new or unexpected. So authors should state very clearly and concisely of the new findings. So the second reviewer was requesting the authors to actually tell the novel and new findings. The third one said it is difficult to see how this paper contributes to obtaining new knowledge in the field. You see, all the 3 reviewers were saying the same thing. The novel finding was not clear. And given the fact there was novel finding, and this clearly a writing problem. So once we got these comments back, and we rewrote the paper, with the two contributions buried, I said, we rewrote the paper by clearly identifying the messages we want to focus on. And then we actually submitted the revised paper to a better journal for those who work in the water field. We actually submitted this paper to Water Research, and which is the best journal in the field. And then we got this paper this time, got two reviews. And one said, I find the manuscript well written and interesting, some minor suggestions. So he was happy, or he or she was happy. Basically a number of minor comments there. Second one, even more interesting. He said, this is an interesting and a valuable paper on sulfide control in sewers. I shouldn't really give all the details there, and you can identify which paper. So you see, look at the second sentence there. Nitrate addition is a common technique for sulfide control, but this paper implies that it may be of no effect on the inhibition of SRB. SRB stands for sulfate-reducing bacteria. You see this? This is exactly the new finding, what we wanted to tell. And we wrote the paper in such a way that reviewer easily find the novel finding there. And once again, there's basically a few minor comments, and which we could address in a day, and then we submitted, and the paper got accepted. So you can see the importance of identifying the novel finding, and you write your paper to deliver the novel finding. Now, how do we identify A, B, and C, D, E? So we say, analyze our data. How do we do that? I have a general procedure, may not be applicable to all cases, but you can think about this procedure when you analyze your data. First step, you put all of your graphs and the tables down. Put it down. The tables, key tables, and the graphs in there. And the second step, you make observations based on what is presented in that figure or in that table. Sometimes you need to do in-depth data analysis. Okay, you can't just always remain at superficial or observational level. Once you have done the two steps, then you synthesize your data. You synthesize all the dot points there to see if we have put all the dot points together, what does my data conclusively tell? Tell you 5 things, A, B, C, D, E, and from there you need to undertake next step to identify E. So here is how you identify A, B, C, D, E. And one important point is you could look, in some cases, you could look at what does your data suggest. The difference between the third one and the tell and suggest. The suggest means it's inconclusive, right? You don't have a conclusion, but you see my data suggest. In many cases, this is actually a very useful contribution, especially in some of the new fields. You don't have a lot of data out in the public literature, and you produce some data in favor of one's hypothesis, and then that is regarded as a very valuable contribution. So you could actually write a paper based on what your data suggests, right? Now, I just want to talk about one particular case, in the sense, when you draw the 3 circles, you can see the third one here, the pink one, does not really directly overlap with the other 2. This is what is important, so the readers want to know this, but your findings are there. But you know some of your messages, like E or whichever one, is important, but there's not direct link there. And in this case, you will have to, in your introduction, you will have to write a paragraph to build a bridge. So you start from here saying these are important, but then somehow you know what E is in your finding, and somehow you have to link that to this circle. So we had actually a good example here. This is one example, a paper we published in 2005, 11 years ago already. We were developing a metabolic model. Don't worry, I'm not going into details. We developed a metabolic model to describe the metabolism of one organism. That's called PAOs. So just remember it's PAOs. This was the model we developed. And then we were trying to write this up. If using the three-circle approach, we see the contribution of this work was we developed this metabolic model for PALS to use propionate, which is the carbon source with the 3 carbon there, propionate anaerobically. And we developed the model, and then we experimentally validated the model. So that was the contribution. But what was in literature back then was in literature, other people, was actually 10 years before we published our paper, they actually developed a similar model with acetate as the carbon source. Right? The same organism, they were using acetate as carbon source. And then you can see this, you can easily see the danger there. Because this is a 2 carbon, a 3 carbon, that's incremental. People can see that's an incremental progress, right? You have to convince it's not incremental. And also, the problem is, people say, I want to understand and model my EBPR process. That, by the way, the PAOs, those organisms, they perform the so-called EBPR process. So people want to understand the EBPR process. Then you say, why is this important? So we have a 2 carbon, so C2, we have C3, 2 carbon, 3 carbon. We also have compounds with 4 carbon and 5 carbons, right? And then does that mean you can write 1 paper for each of the carbon source? Of course not. So then here, that was a trick we played. The second, we made a 2 argument in the introduction. We said propionate is actually the second dominating VFA, volatile fatty acid, in wastewater. So that's just not one of many carbon sources. It is the second most important carbon source, number 1. And number 2, we were saying this is actually the crucial point. And in the EBPR, in the process we were studying, there are 2 competitors. One is called PALS, one is called gas. These are guys we want to have, and these are guys we did not want to have in an EBPR process. And we found, previous studies actually found propionate favors PALS over gas, and that's important. So that means you really have to understand the metabolism by PALS to utilize propionate. So with that little bridge, we convinced the reviewer and the editor, and this is a worthwhile paper. Now, sometimes, as I said, I think I said this once already, the B and the D. So some findings have been reported in literature already, and your work has merely reconfirmed those hypotheses or those findings. Sometimes you may be able to write a paper, not always. Sometimes you may be able to write a paper, provided provided that try to find later, you add more strong evidence. So either by using a more comprehensive study. So maybe the previous study draw the conclusions based on relatively circumstantial evidence. People believed those evidence, but it's not comprehensive. And you can do comprehensive studies by verifying that from all possible angles. And another possibility is you have deployed new methods. I'll just give you another example here. So that's another paper published by the same person. And the conclusion of that paper was higher pH favors PALS over gas. Now you know PALS and gas. So this was known at the time when we wrote this paper. But how did we manage to publish the paper? Because previous studies, they used process data based on the reactor performance. They inferred that higher pH favors PALS over gas. And here in our study, we use what is a molecular method. You show different colors. And right now, everybody uses the technique. But 10 years ago, it was actually pretty novel. We actually use molecular method to demonstrate some organisms are higher pH. We have the desirable organisms growing. With lower pH, you don't see too many of those. Right? Direct evidence. The message was not new anymore, but we provided additional and very strong evidence, and actually direct evidence to show that was the case. So you can write a paper based on B, and a D. Now, I'd like to warn everybody, when you write your paper, you have to make a realistic and moderate claims. Don't overclaim. Overclaim is really, really a killer, especially when you write the title of your article. You have to choose very, very careful. You don't want to risk expectation. If you don't qualify your title, then people will say, oh, look, this is fantastic. And then when they move into your paper, they read the text, they get disappointed. Say, oh, no, really, you did not really provide enough evidence to support your message. Or they say, okay, this message is not that clear, it's not that novel. Right? I'll give you one example. Let's show you how many qualifying words you have to use in your title of one paper. You can check this paper. And this you publish in Water Research. You can see all the red words with underlined. And that they were deliberately chosen, they were carefully chosen to basically to make moderate claims. Demonstration, that means we're not developing a full system, it's a demonstration. And that's not why I try to understand the domestic, that's the domestic wastewater, not industrial wastewater, because others have done industrial wastewater already. Pre-identification is just one technology term, right? So by putting in those technology terms, those qualifying terms, words, in the title, we don't risk expectation by the reviewers or editor. And this is actually quite important for many of you. And rarely you work in a field or in an area nobody else is doing any work, and you're the only one. If you only want whatever you find is novel, is new, you write a paper, no problem. The fact is, in any single area, you find hundreds, if not thousands of people working in the same area, right? And X is doing this, Y is doing that. If you see a piece of paper, you draw the lines to describe people's work, you actually don't find a big space where nobody's in. You always work next to another person, right? And everybody is making incremental progress. So that's why you need to make careful claims. You don't want to overclaim. If you ignored somebody else's finding, you say, oh, this is the first time something like this has been found, and quite likely you will get your paper reviewed by that guy, because you are working in the same field, or someone knows that paper or that work. And then immediately you will be shot down. So be careful with what you try to sell. Now, that's about identifying the messages. So A, B, C, D, E, then you choose E, and then you try to write your paper to deliver E. But how do we write the paper, structure the paper to deliver that key message? So this is a structure of a typical paper. Here we see introduction, material and methods, results, discussion, and conclusions. And all of these need to be written to deliver messages. Right? If you follow my approach, a three-circle approach, actually this structure will follow. Talking about introduction. Normally what you will do, you will start from the pink circle, opening. You're opening in a relatively broad field. You see this is important. Like we write papers on greenhouse gases, and we say global warming, therefore greenhouses are important. We have to mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions. And then gradually you need to move on to literature review. So what has been done? What is known, right? Here I see it's a focused literature review. Different people have different styles. I don't like broad literature review in introduction. I like to have a focused literature review. Broad can be distracting, but some people don't like that approach. So you will see papers of different styles. I guess that's a matter of choice. I don't like broad literature review in introduction. I say focused literature review. And that means my literature review, well, I'm sure you have read 500 papers, but then you would only try to review a small fraction of that, which is directly related to what you have done. Right? You review the literature, and then this is important. That was known already. You identify the gaps. Of course, there are many gaps, 100 gaps there. You identify the gap or gaps you are addressing, right? So opening, focused literature review, highlighting the gaps and objectives of your research. Then you finish. Right? That's the introduction. Material methods, I guess that's very, very much different according to the papers, depending on the methods you use. Talk about results and discussion. If we use this approach, results and discussion, relatively easy to organize. Because you know A, B, C, D, E, you know the results, right? You know the messages. So you can use that approach, you can relatively easily work out your research and results and discussion section. Here I'd like to highlight this requirement of literature review. For results discussion, particularly in this discussion section, literature review is critically important. And that one can be a much broader than what you have done in introduction. Because introduction, you want to guide your readers to your research objective. And here, you want to justify your research finding. Right? You want to make sure you argue your research findings are novel, are new, nobody else have made those findings. And you need to use literature data report to support your findings. And you want to say, not just me have found that, others have found other evidence to support. Now, if we know the message, they actually support the message. Right? So that's broad, quite broad literature review. So believe it or not, we write papers on wastewater management. We actually sometimes quote medical research journals because the compounds are compounds, chemicals are chemicals. Right? So you can really go broad. But it would be very weird if your wastewater paper you have here, you start reviewing medical field. Right? Now, if you follow this, conclusions, I like the dot points conclusions. You see, key conclusions of this paper is this. By the way, we also found this and that, right? So you just follow that structure, it's pretty easy to write the conclusions. Now, one thing that everybody needs to decide when you write a paper is to decide whether or not you want to write separate results and discussion sections, or you write combined sections. For some journals, they don't give you the choice, and they have their way, and then you just have to follow. With other journals, and most journals will allow you to choose 2 separate sections, results, then discussion, or put them together. So how do we make those choices? I'd like to share some of my experience. The cases for combined research results and discussion. Now this is a very simple scenario. You've got three sets of experimental results, 1, 2, 3. And based on those results, you deliver 3 messages, 1, 2, 3. And the fact is, message 1 can be delivered, can be supported by results 1 with some literature support. And the message 2 is supported by results 2, and the message 3 is supported by results 3. With this, the best structure is to write the 2 together, combine them. And it's very easy, so you present results 1, then you add a paragraph there to discuss, then you get message 1 summarized. The same, result 2, message 2. If you try to write this with separate results and the discussion sections, you will actually find you will be repeating yourself, because results there is almost very close to draw the conclusions already, but then you wait until the next section. You will find it's very uncomfortable. So this is the classical case for separate for combined. So one key thing here is the literature use should be relatively light. If you have a heavy literature discussion, this structure may not work out. Now, a slightly more complicated case, but I still believe this is a case for combined results discussion, is message 1 is based on result 1, and message 2 is based on both result 1 and result 2, and message 3 is based on the 3. You can see it's still relatively linear. If you present result 1, then you can discuss, you draw a conclusion, and message 1 is delivered. Then you present result 2, by then result 1 has been presented already. So you can combine